Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started. If everybody could maybe grab their drink, take a seat. We're going to get this BEPS info session party started, because that's what it is. All right. My name's Emily Andrews. I'm the Executive Director of the U.S. Green Building Council, Missouri Gateway Chapter. We're here tonight with the Building Energy Exchange, St. Louis, and the City of St. Louis Office of Building Performance for a BEPS info session, an info session on the Building Energy Performance Standard. Before we get started with that, I will just point out, restrooms are over here. You'll have to go back out and over here to my right. Beer will be flowing in the back. At 5:30, when this event ends, when the BEPS info session ends, we'll have joint networking with the USGBC-Missouri Gateway Chapter's evening program, which you're welcome to stick around for. So we'll have some networking, and then the presentation for that will start around 6:10 or so. On the split incentive problem, solving the split incentive problem. So lots to talk about related to energy efficiency tonight. With that, I am going to turn the floor over to James Kelly. James is an energy analyst with the Office of Building Performance in the City of St. Louis. He's going to give us a presentation, an overview of BEPS, how to comply, everything you need to know. And then we'll hear from Cara Spencer about some of the resources available through the Building Energy Exchange. James? And I think this will work. Yes.
All right. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming out. I'm James Kelly. I'm one of 4 people staffing the Office of Building Performance that administers and oversees this program, the Building Energy Performance Standards. So I'll talk a little bit about that, what it is, why it is, what's expected, and what you have to do to comply. That's what this is here. Do I have a pen? Oh yeah. Okay. So the what and the why of BEPS. So BEPS, the program, has its roots in what's called the St. Louis Climate Protection Initiative, which is it encompasses many projects and programs that are all trying to make St. Louis a nicer, cleaner, greener, more attractive place to live and to work. And one part of this initiative that kind of started the program was a greenhouse gas survey, where they discovered that of the many sources of greenhouse gas in the city, buildings, commercial and residential, contribute a huge proportion, the majority, in fact. And so that discovery, coupled with the fact that we already kind of knew St. Louis buildings were older and lower performing on average than other buildings across the country, and that most of the improvements that could be made were the low-hanging fruit. It was cheap stuff or things that wouldn't cost anything at all to get building performance up and begin reducing greenhouse gases emitted by city buildings. So the city saw this as an area ripe for improvement and ripe for development. And it could be a way also to revitalize the city. So, long story short, many interested parties came together to create BEPS. And when I say BEPS, I mean the program encompassing 2 ordinances that established the program. So we had help from nonprofits like IMT. We had, I say we, people before me, had money from Bloomberg Philanthropies to develop these kind of green initiatives. We had the passage, ultimately, of 2 ordinances and broad support by the Board of Aldermen. And the Missouri Gateway Chapter, USGBC, also helped create BEPS. So it came to be. And in the interest of reducing greenhouse gases and achieving all those goals that I talked about, the program has 3 main components. First, there's reporting your energy use. That's also known as benchmarking. Every year, buildings have to track their electricity, their natural gas, their water, and other property details, and they send those off to us. The second part of the program is making improvements to energy efficiency. This involves setting goals, maybe getting an audit, determining the scope of work, and then finding contractors or consultants to do that work. And then finally, the third and maybe the most important part of the program of BEPS is hitting these performance targets. So this is where buildings will strive to achieve certain energy efficiency minimums over cycles that I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. And since the passage of our program, and also before it, there's been a proliferation of programs like this. You'll see St. Louis is here in purple, and it's kind of a flagship program in that it's gone further than many others, and it was done despite considerable odds. And so other cities, other counties, other states have followed suit, and we'll be seeing more to come in the future. The program, BEPS, was also established with an office. That's who I said I represent. It's the Office of Building Performance. I'm the energy analyst. My boss, Cara, is also sitting here. And we are housed in the Public Safety Department as part of the Building Division. But we operate kind of autonomously. And there's four of us total. Myself, Rob, our new analyst, Lisa, the secretary, and Katerina here. And that's our website. We have a website that I will constantly push people to look for resources or anything we might post, stlbenchmarking.com. So the first part of the program is something I think everyone is familiar with, I hope, building owners at least, is the reporting part. That's just where you create an account in an online portal that we use developed by the EPA called Energy Star Portfolio Manager. You choose a property type, and you can basically enter your bills for natural gas or water, electricity, and it's a place to track and observe changes in your energy use over time. This collects the data. At some point, hopefully by May 1st every year, you click the report button on our website and send that data off to us so we can monitor compliance and hopefully do something useful with it. What we do with that data is we collect a lot of stuff. We have the raw figures, the energy you're consuming, and we can calculate all kinds of metrics that could be used to gauge the performance of a building and to assess how efficient it might be or what improvements could be made. The one that we use in this program to determine a building's compliance and see if it's on track with the standards that we have set for it is called the Weather Normalized Site Energy Use Intensity, or you just call it the EUI for short. You basically calculate it by collecting all the energy use over the year, adjusting it for local weather such that a building's not penalized, say, if in a given year there was a very, very cold winter and a hot summer that really taxed all the systems. And then you divide that energy use by the square footage, and that gives you this EUI. So it's a relationship between how much energy a building uses in a year and how big that building is. So this is the chief performance metric. This is what's used to determine a property's compliance with the program. So EUI is just a representation of a building's energy efficiency, and lower is better. Lower means they're using less energy per square foot, or they're using a low amount of energy relative to their size. So that means a big building would obviously use more energy, but that's okay. You would expect a big building to use more energy, and that because they're big, it's not going to be held against them. So you can calculate this metric, EUI, and this forms the basis of the standards part of the building energy performance standards, what we call a target. This is the goal energy efficiency that buildings will strive to hit over a number of years. And the way we find this is by grouping properties by the type that they select when they set up their portfolio manager and start entering their data, whether it's a restaurant or a multifamily or a church, or there's over 80 property types that you can choose from. And if you look at the EUIs of all the properties within a type, you get some kind of distribution like this. You get people who are using a relatively high amount of energy for their size, and so have EUIs of a couple hundred, and people who are very efficient or have just shut the lights off and don't use hardly any energy at all. And what the law requires in St. Louis is that the target be set at the 65th or 35th percentile, however you want to call it. The idea is that the target will fall such that 65% of the buildings within a certain property type, in this case multifamily housing, they'll have to make some improvements to comply. They've got some work to do. Whereas the other roughly 35% of buildings that are already below the target, the day the target came out, they already hit it. They don't really have to do anything. They can maintain their performance as is. They can be overachievers and make improvements if they want, but they can just stay the course and run out the cycle. So this is the way targets are set for every property type that's in the city. You can choose, as I said, from over 80. We're not seeing all of them. We don't have any 50,000 square foot bowling alleys, I don't think, in the city, but we're always discovering more. And every property will have its own target. So all these targets are just specific EUIs, goals that properties will strive to achieve, hopefully by the end of the cycle. So each property has a target. Targets drive improvements, as I said, in the least efficient, worst performing 65% of buildings. And at the end of a cycle, which I'll explain in a minute, 2025 for most buildings, those targets are reevaluated. We look at, again, that distribution of EUIs, see where that 65% line falls, and then set a new target for the next cycle. So they're constantly adjusted to accommodate how buildings in this city are really performing. This is a quick summary of all the targets. I've taken some liberty in grouping some property types together that are similar, like a restaurant and a food service and a fast food, or an apartment building and a condo building. So I've reduced the number of properties to get them to fit in a nice plot. You can see some of the most intensive property types are hospitals and grocery stores, who will have the highest targets, the highest targets because they use the most energy, and then other property types down here, like libraries and offices that use relatively little energy for their size. So, compliance. Given that we track all the properties, we have their energy use, we've set a target for everybody, what do they have to do to comply? Well, the first steps, really before you're even concerned with what I'm about to tell you next or about this program, are to do these 5 things. This is true basically all the time for any building, always. Benchmark your buildings so you know where you stand. You have some reference point to gauge how your building's performing. Most buildings have already done this. They've been doing it since 2017 when this part of the program started. Number 2, they have to determine your goals. It might be, in this case, I'm talking about meeting our regulatory requirements, hitting these targets, but you might have other goals to, say, appease investors or address tenant demands or achieve your own energy performance goals for your buildings or your portfolio. There's lots of goals. The one I'm going to talk about is just meeting the requirements of the program. Step 3, once you have your goals, is to get an energy audit. There's various levels or degrees of energy audit you can get, but basically you have a professional come in and assess the building top to bottom. You look at not only the energy that it's using and the way that building is being used by the people in it, but it's also an assessment of the equipment it has, the structures it has, how it's designed, its age, and at the end of that audit, crucially, there's recommendations, real actions that are given, what are called energy efficiency measures. They're things you can do as an owner, and the return on those actions to reduce your energy consumption and reduce your energy costs. So armed with that information from the audit, properties will have to decide what's feasible for them, which things achieve the energy reductions they need, which things have the return on investment that they need to see to balance their budget or to appease whoever. And so you define the scope of the work that has to be done. And finally, you may have to solicit bids for the job. So that's an overview, basically, of ideally what properties will do once they know their target and once they know how much work has to be done to hit that target. And they do this over what I keep saying are compliance cycles. These are, we have these targets that move over time, but they're only adjusted every so often. Right now we're in cycle number 1, the very first compliance cycle, which for most buildings ends in 2025. So this is a schematic of that cycle, basically showing how most buildings are on kind of a 3+1+1 scheme, where the targets were, BEPS was established in 2020, technically. The targets came out in 2021, so they have 3 years to make improvements, 2021, 22, and 23. The +1 is 2024, when hopefully, having made those improvements, they can have 2024 be their banner year, their best performing year, because that fourth year of measurement will be the one we use to determine compliance in 2025. So most properties, they get 3 years to make improvements, 1 year to show off their improvements and effectively get a score up on the board. And then when they report that data in May of 2025, we as an office take a year to assess it and work with people on compliance and then reestablish those targets for the next cycle. So I made a more detailed timeline that there's probably no way you can read standing in the back, but it's just elaborating on what I just told you. These cycles repeat themselves. So I've highlighted some things just to show how it repeats. For example, the targets were set in 2021 for this first cycle. For most properties, they will be set again in 2026, and then again in 2031. Likewise, most buildings will make improvements over a 3-year period. So we're in one of those 3-year periods right now. That's here, but in the next cycle, it'll begin again. They'll have 2026, 2027, and 2028. In third cycle, they'll have 31, 32, 33. So these, you can see the first 3 cycles here just iterating over and over again. There's also a 7-year cycle that's probably not worth getting into because it's exactly like I just described, except for qualified affordable housing and houses of worship, churches, they get an extra couple years. So rather than being allowed 3 years to make improvements, they have 5 years. They work for 5 years, hopefully making improvements. 1 year is benchmarked and used as kind of their representative performance, and then we again take a year to assess and to adjust. So they're on 7-year, 5+1+1. These other guys, most people in this room will be familiar with this, a 3+1+1, so 5 years. So I talked about what's expected to comply, just the basic steps any building can take and the timelines that they can anticipate working on, the deadlines they can work towards. We have also provided in this program different paths to compliance because we have to acknowledge a couple realities. One is that not all buildings are in the same position to make improvements. They've already made improvements, say, they don't have the funding. There's infinite number of reasons why a building might find themselves in unusual circumstances and need another way to demonstrate that they're upholding the spirit of the law, they're trying to make improvements, they're doing the best they can, but maybe they can't hit that target. It's also possible that our targets are just not good. They're based on data from the city, but that data could have been misreported or skewed, or the targets just might be unreasonable, even given the best data. So there's 4 ways that a property can comply. 3 of them, I'll spend some time on this and in the next few slides. We consider 2 of them preferred. The first 2 here, Path 1 and Path 2, called Performance and Early Adopter, are preferred in that they both involve just hitting the target. The property will hit their target outright and stay on that schedule that I outlined. There's really no special requirements. They either hit the target and demonstrate that they've complied, or in the case of the second path, if a property not only hits the target but overshoots it, they hit the target and make a 20% improvement on where they started back in 2018, say, they can be considered compliant not only for that cycle but also the next one. And likewise, if a property not only hits the target but makes a 50% reduction, you can be compliant for that cycle and the next two. So this is a way to reward properties that are kind of ahead of the curve a little bit. They're maybe already very efficient, or they're investing in these things early, well ahead of when they're forced to do so or absolutely have to. These other two paths down here are what we call alternative, and they're for the people who, like I said, find themselves in one of many circumstances that means they can't hit the target. And so what these provide is an alternative target. This path number 3, called narrow the gap, is achieved when a property can basically meet us in the middle, meet us halfway. If you can make a 50% improvement from where you started and where the target is, so meet us in the middle, that can be good enough. And properties can do that for the first 2 compliance cycles. They can do it leading up to this 2025 deadline, and they can do it in the 2030 deadline. Close half that distance between where they started and where they were expected to be. If that's not possible, there's a fourth, and this is the most flexible, most accommodating path, but there's some caveats and some things that go along with it. This is the number 4, the Custom Alternative Compliance Path, CACP. This is properties that they can't hit the target, they can't even hit half the target, they're in bad shape for any number of reasons. That's okay. They can undergo a process that I'll describe in a minute where they set new targets, basically, and may be able to operate over longer timelines, not just looking at 2025 or 2030, but maybe thinking ahead many more years and about the improvements they can make more gradually over time. So another way to view these paths these 4 paths that I just told you about, is that the first 3, 1, 2, and 3, they all center around the target. They're all about either hitting the target, getting halfway to the target, or exceeding the target. So that's what I tried to show here. If you are decreasing your EUI, like decreasing your energy use per square foot per year, you start off in your baseline phase. Basically, you have a starting point, which we call your baseline. Eventually, you cross into narrow the gap territory, where maybe you've now met half the target. You've made it halfway there. Well, if you keep decreasing further, you cross into performance compliance territory, where maybe now you're hitting the target. And if you keep pushing even further and start making those 20% or 50% reductions in excess of where you had to be, you can be early adopter, where you get compliance for multiple cycles for many years at a time. That custom path that I explained, it's a totally other beast. It doesn't fit on my nice target schematic here. So what I was going for was like a gemstone. The CACP is multifaceted, it's complex, and it's going to be unique for every property, because no one property's needs and demands and limitations are going to be the same. So that 4th plan, I think, is worth explaining a little bit. Like I said, it's unique, and it's going to be tailored by the property for that property. They'll work with our office, but the property is going to come up with that plan themselves, subject to certain restrictions. You have to undergo an eligibility determination. You fill out an application, because not all properties will be eligible. Just not wanting to hit the target or not wanting to spend the money, those are probably not good enough reasons. But we outline in the program five good reasons that I can talk about later that would make someone eligible to start on this process of developing a CACP, a custom plan. If you're eligible, you have to undergo, if you haven't already, an energy audit. That's a certain kind of thorough, regulated energy audit that, again, looks at your building, its systems, and recommends energy efficiency measures, actions you can take to reduce your consumption. With that audit, you then have to develop a plan that has certain requirements, but that enacts some of those energy efficiency measures and hopefully works towards reducing energy over time. In your plan, you have to demonstrate there's milestones that gives you and also the office a way to check in on you over time, which is especially important if we're going to throw that 2025 deadline out the window and say, work over many years, we'll check in on you later. So milestones become an important part. Because you're executing the plan over years or even cycles. And the last part of CACP is that there may be appeals. If a property doesn't like our determination that they're ineligible, or doesn't like our determination that their plan is no good, it doesn't go far enough, it doesn't make good enough use of their energy audit and those energy efficiency measures, they can appeal and get a second opinion outside of our office. They can get an opinion from a board and continue on that path despite what we may think about it. So that's what's expected of compliance. Those are the ways to comply. There is help out there. I've told you what's expected of you and what we're looking for, but I didn't really say much about like how are you supposed to realize it as a business owner? Where's the money supposed to come from? Who am I supposed to call? I'm an energy analyst. I don't know how to retrofit a building. I can't help you really, but there are people who can. And your best resource for that is the Building Energy Exchange, St. Louis. It's called the BX, the BX STL. And they are the official partner of our office in providing help and in doing outreach and in connecting building owners to the resources, the money, the people, the consultants, the firms that they need to hit these targets that I've explained. You can also find help, of course, in our office. We have what we call property scorecards that you can find on our website that tell you where your building stands today and what needs to be done. You can look to our website very soon in August for a handbook, like a program manual that explains everything I've just said and then some, top to bottom, how the program works, what's expected, what information we need from you on a regular basis. That's going to be in the handbook. It's with an editor now. It's going to be published in August. And you can also register for trainings and info sessions like this. There is also, you can contact us personally. That's my email and the phone number. You can always email our central office email, benchmarking at stlouis-mo.gov, and you can schedule an in-person consultation, probably with me, but maybe with someone else in the office. And those links are available on our website, stlbenchmarking.com, and you can scan the code right there. And that's it for me. Thanks for your time. I hope you have some questions. Okay, I saw you first.
For new buildings that come online that exceed your targets, do they fall on this? I don't remember what you called it, but the ones that are like way beyond the targets, overachievers. So a new building that overachieves would have the same route as a existing building that improved to that level?
Right. Say a new building were to be opened up today, and it's highly energy efficient and they're already exceeding the target. Well, one, they wouldn't have to worry about the target because they're meeting it already. But two, our policy is that if we discover a building that should have been reporting to us and should have been complying with this program, but wasn't known to us, had fallen off the radar, had not been identified, or a building that opens brand new in the middle of a cycle, we ask that they report their energy use every year, but they are exempt from having to hit a target. And that's especially important for new buildings that maybe aren't energy efficient. They had no idea of any of this stuff that I'm talking about, and we just blindside them one day with deadlines and requirements. They don't have to worry. They don't have to meet that deadline in 2025. We'll see them again in 2030. So new buildings, in any sense of the word new, get exempt from complying in the cycle in which we found them. What is the benefit of hitting the target versus not hitting the target? Well, the hope is you can be persuaded about making your building more energy efficient to reduce your own costs. You don't have to buy into the green or sustainability side of the program, which is about reducing greenhouse gases and building a brighter future and all that stuff. You don't have to care about any of that stuff. You can just look at it in terms of dollars and cents, I think. So buildings are hopefully motivated and inspired that there are savings to be had. They're easier to achieve than they may have thought, and there's people there and money to be had that can help them do it. Is that? Oh, if they decide. Yeah, so I'm talking about the carrot. There is a stick as well. There's fines for failing to report your energy use every year in May. There's fines that can build up. In all honesty, it's a pittance for most buildings. They could pay, it's a few $100s per day, not to exceed some number of thousands of dollars. Same thing for BEPS. There's monetary penalties, but for most people, they're not going to care about that. If they really don't want to comply, it's hard to make them. Except, being in the building division, this program is tied to the permitting process. And so buildings who really fail to comply and thumb their nose at us can have their occupancy permits pulled. And yeah, right. So you can pay the fines, but you may not have an occupancy permit one day, and that'll be very bad. We hope it doesn't come to that. It would be ugly, but that's our big stick. Yeah. How many buildings are covered by BEPS, you're asking? Yeah, we have, known to us right now, we have like 1,100, but we know there are more in the city. In fact, we were sifting through some data from the Planning and Urban Design Agency and from the Tax Assessor's Office, and we found over 200 more buildings that we had not known about before, but they're going to be covered by the law now. And like I said to him, these 200 will be added to the system. We'll start soliciting energy use reports from them every year, but they're not going to have to hit any target. So that'll bring us up to about 1,300 or so covered buildings, and there may be more. I estimate there's a few hundred. Maybe I found 200 recently. There might be a couple hundred more. And of those, say for 2021, we're well past the deadline now. Everyone should have reported by May, but reports have been trickling in even up to like a few hours ago, I think. And I think our compliance is like 65% or so, maybe 70%. But that last 30% is a stubborn bunch, because most of them have never reported, and we don't have contact information. We just know the building exists on a plot of land, and so we've got to get in touch with them somehow. And that's a problem.
I'm going to bust in here real quickly. Just to switch gears really quickly, we've got till 5:30. So I'm on to, James has all the meat. We're going to still do a Q&A at the end. My name is Cara Spencer. I'm with the Building Energy Exchange. I'm going to give a very quick presentation on the Building Energy Exchange, and then we'll stick around for questions. So James has all the meat. I have a lot of the fluff. I'm the salesperson. I'm going to sell you on a few things here. I'm going to sell you on the fact that this is a good program. It's a good idea. It's good for the city, and it's good for your business, no matter what your business is. Number two, that, what am I going to sell you on? Number two, that you should work with the Building Energy Exchange, that it's a fantastic resource, and it will help you do number one. And number three, that you should stick around and network, because we have free beer at the end. Okay, so let's go through this. Building Energy Exchange. The Building Energy Exchange, we are a nonprofit. We are a project of the U.S. Green Building Council, Missouri Gateway Chapter, and our mission is to be a hub of resources to help the real estate community reduce the energy consumption of buildings and make St. Louis a more resilient and carbon neutral region. Why? Why are we starting with buildings? Okay, here's where I'm going to sell you on the concept. Climate change, as we all know, is driven by greenhouse gas emissions. Nationally speaking, buildings make up 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions. It's a lot, 40%, right? It's like almost half. But here in St. Louis, unbelievably, our buildings here in St. Louis make a whopping 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Climate change in St. Louis is quite literally driven by our buildings. So addressing the emissions, the carbon emissions of our buildings is actually and literally the most effective and efficient way we can start to reduce our carbon footprint and become a green city. This is actually, just to kind of point out how much we stand out nationally, you know, as far as cities go and greenhouse gas emissions, 40% in LA come from buildings, 74% in Salt Lake City. We really are sticking out like a sore thumb. Okay, we've got older buildings, we've got a lot of fluctuation in our heating and cooling and what our temperature are, but 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions here in St. Louis come from our buildings. Okay, so who cares, right? Why should we care? Well, here's some depressing news. Most of us in this room are in the real estate business of some kind. In the last census, St. Louis, our region, not just the city, dropped out of the top 20 metros for the first time ever, with slower growth, but all but 3 of the nation's 50 largest metro areas. That is tremendous stagnation. Even worse, this last year in 2021, the city of St. Louis lost 8,000 people in 1 year. 1 year we lost, and maybe fell below 300,000 people. The county didn't do any better. The county fell below a million. And this is not something that's happening universally in cities. Many cities, our peer cities, are growing, and we are failing to grow. We are losing population in both our city and our county. Really, really depressing. So how does this tie in to regulations of our buildings? Well, addressing climate change on a large-scale regional basis is one of the most effective ways St. Louis can rebrand itself, remarket itself, and remake itself as a successful, healthy, growing community. We know that climate change is driving decisions from college majors to products to buy, and yes, places to live. We really do have the bones for it beyond just our buildings. We know that the greenest building is the one that's already built. St. Louis has so many buildings that the building division is still finding them. 200 they found recently. They're all over the place. We have tons of buildings. We have a great supply of them. Our proximity to the water, to our nation's largest source of fresh water, has both potential in logistics and transportation. Did you know that transporting goods on water is quite literally the most efficient and carbon neutral way of transporting goods? We have access to that here in St. Louis. And as we've been talking about, our city has taken steps to lay the groundwork for being one of the most sustainable cities in the nation as it pertains to buildings. As James pointed out, we are one of the only cities in the nation that have the performance standards, which is cutting edge. The city of St. Louis is quite literally cutting edge in this regard, but we are not, but other cities are not far behind us. This map that James had up earlier, the benchmarking where you have to report and disclose your energy consumption, that ordinance that comes first, the first of the two that James was talking about, is pervasive. It's taking hold of the United States. So this is the first step. This is step number 2. We are at step number 2, which is quite frankly really unusual for the city of St. Louis to be at the front end of a national wave, a wave of what's coming next. So we're ahead of the curve, which is great. The Biden administration, we've got a national coalition on this. We're already there. As James pointed out, when we compare our data nationally, our buildings are less efficient. So we use the benchmarking data from our local buildings, which is important because our standards are set by what our buildings use. And as you can see here, our buildings use a lot more energy than the national standard when it comes to labs. That first graph line is the national standard on the left, and what St. Louis uses. We've got a lot of fantastic labs, but they are energy hogs. So it's really important that we did use local data because we are accounting for the massive amounts of energy that our St. Louis buildings use. So it's attainable. These goals are attainable because they're based not on national standards, but on our local standards, okay? Can it be done? Believe it or not, City Hall is compliant. It's compliant with the energy standard. If anybody's been in City Hall lately, they're not compliant with building codes. Sorry, building division, but it really isn't. I mean, there's extension cords everywhere. But it is compliant with the energy performance standard. And if City Hall can get there, anybody, any building in the city of St. in the region can get to the standard. Okay? So it's doable. What can the building energy do to exchange? Here's what we're focusing on to help the building community get compliant. We've got information. We're here to answer your questions. The building division obviously is very, very accessible and working with us, so they're also here, but we can answer your questions. We've got how-to guides, and we're about to announce a really incredible collaboration with HOK on some additional modules that will be very, very helpful to you all. We have case studies that are showcasing local buildings that have made massive reductions in their energy consumption and their energy bills, and are becoming compliant with the energy standards. And we are keeping track and making sure that we're making everyone aware of the financial tools. How in the heck are you going to pay for this? We're not only keeping you aware of all the tools that are available, but the Building Energy Exchange is working to make additional tools and additional financing options available. So that's a big part of our mission. And we've recently, with the help of Ross and Barasini, Annie Smith, who's here tonight, launched an audit program, a pilot program, where we're going to be working with building owners to do a DIY, a hybrid approach to auditing your building and finding the low-hanging fruit and finding the ways in which you can reduce your energy consumption without spending a ton of money on the upfront, okay? So just to give you an example, we've got some how-to guides here on everything from water pumps, dedicated air systems, etc. You can go to our website. We've got a bunch of how-to guides, and we've got a bunch of case studies. So we're working on putting more together. So if you've got one, if you've got a building that's really, really remarkable and has made great strides, we want to know about it because we want to highlight the work you're doing. So to give you some examples and ideas of what we are putting together, case study number 1, parking lot lighting. This was a Guarantee Electric project. They took 73 outside fixtures. They replaced 400-watt heads with 133-watt LEDs. The cost of the project, $40,000. Annual energy savings, $12,000. This is a real project. It took 3.2 years to pay for that. A great investment. It makes sense. It's not just do-gooder, fix the earth. This is fixing your bottom line. Number 2, interior lighting. Same deal. If you haven't done your lighting yet, this is just a no-brainer. You've got a building who runs on average 12 hours a day, interior light fixtures. They replaced them all with LED, a $62,000 project. It's a big upfront cost. But with an Ameren incentive, we have great partners here with Ameren Inspire on our utility side. Annual energy savings of 33 years made a payback of 1.2 years. This is very, very simple. Very, very simple stuff. Another project, HVAC controls, City Place 1, downtown. We've got the installation of digital building automation, an automation system to control the building HVAC systems. This project was over $500,000, a $500,000 cost, okay, to do HVAC controls. You put in the incentives for that, come up with an annual energy savings of $155,000 a year, and you're looking at a 2-year payback. I mean, these things are just money makers. Yes. This project in particular was just utility incentives. There are some tax incentives. They do usually add to that stack, but it isn't. It's a small compared, but it adds to it, and it certainly is helpful. But you're right. If you didn't have the incentive, it'd be a 3.7-year payback. So these things save building owners tons of money, and it's all about getting the information out there, educating property owners and the property managers and the decision makers here that these things make sense for your bottom line. That's what we're here to do. This was a lab building. The Energy Resources Group, they're here tonight. Brower Hall. It was completed in 2010 as a LEED Gold project. You think, okay, box checked. There's always still improvements and work that can be done. This project was a $444,000 kind of project where, just broadly speaking, identified all kinds of energy efficiency measures that could be taken, added an Ameren incentive and a Spire incentive, plus the annual cost savings of $148,000 a year, a 2.2 year payback. And these are folks that can go through and really audit your entire building and come up with savings that make a lot of sense for your bottom line. So, and lastly, an automatic controls equipment systems project. Yeah, 5 minutes. Yeah. You know, again, this was a really big project, $1.6 million in a building downtown. You had an Ameren incentive of $400,000, and we're looking at 2.9 year payback. So we're putting together examples. These are just highlights, but the Building Energy Exchange is going to be available to go through these in a little more detail so you can see this is not just good for the environment. This is not just good for your ESG goals. It's not just good for your grandchildren and all of the people that live on this earth and breathe our air, but it's also good for your bottom line. So again, the financial tools, we've got Ameren incentives, tons of Ameren incentives. Spire has a ton of rebates that we can be taking advantage of. There are also some other financial tools from the PACE financing. On the federal side, Freddie Mac has PACE financing for multifamily housing units. And then the Missouri Energy Loan Program, if you're not familiar with it, if you're a nonprofit or a public school, hospital, university, et cetera, they have some really, really, really low interest rates, and their loan program is pretty fabulous. So, as I mentioned earlier, we do know that identifying these things are a major, the ways in which you can save your energy is a major component. We do have the summer pilot program, and so if you're interested, find me, find Emily, find Jessica, find anybody, find Alicia, and let us know, and we'll set you up because this is a really fantastic opportunity. The Building Energy Exchange has great partners here locally. We have some great providers of services that can just really help your business, your building, get to the target. And so we're really, really, really lucky to have not only the funders but the talent here to help attract that. As I said, I had 3 things I was going to sell you on: the concept of energy performance standards as a way to grow our city. If we can adopt this and become a green city, we really have a path to growth. If we fail to do this and stick out as a sore thumb as a city whose carbon footprint, 80% of which comes from our buildings, hogging out energy, spitting it out in the air, we are going to become less and less relevant to the new generation of people who really, really care about this stuff. So it's a double-edged sword. It's an opportunity, and a failure is a major curse to all of us. And so I truly believe in this. I hope you all have gotten a little bit of a different perspective. I have some sad news. I'm stepping down as the director of the Building Energy Exchange. Jessica Deem, who is an architect here with her own firm, is taking over in the interim capacity. We are looking for a new director, but I care about this so much. I will be continuing on as a volunteer. I truly believe in the mission of this organization. I truly believe in sustainability as a path for growth for our city and for our region. And even more so, I believe a failure to do so will continue to spiral us downward. Okay, with that, find one of us at the end, and we'll have a few more minutes, I think, for questions. So I'll bring James up. He's the guy, from the city who has got the questions on compliance. Alicia. Oh, yeah, a Zoom question. This is a great question. The question is whether or not you've got a mixed-use building. It has 2 functions or 3 functions or 8, who knows, whether or not the target is based on the mixed use. Right now, by ordinance, it's not. This is a question and a topic for discussion, and one that is worthy of discussion, and we should be talking about it as a community, because especially when it comes to labs or other buildings that have a lab use, an office space, the energy consumed by those two different functions are very, very different. And so so we should be talking about that and thinking about how to move carefully through this and looking at what other cities are doing. Any other questions? Yes. 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 You can have, yes. I don't know if they're on their website, but we can email them and follow up, and sure, absolutely. The question was whether or not the presentations will be available. They are infinitely available. You can email us, we'll email them to you, we'll share them. I believe it's being recorded, and we can share the recording. Yes. Yes. So the question is whether or not these the standards continue in perpetuity. They do evolve. So there are they are reevaluated. So once we go through the first compliance cycle, and whether or not you're compliant, the standard is reset, and it's reset by ordinance such that every cycle, 65% of the buildings in the city of St. Louis will have to do something to reduce their energy consumption. So it's an iterative process. So we're going to be bringing the energy consumption down, iteratively speaking. And it seems harsh, again, but this is saving building owners a tremendous amount of money. We have a lot of old building stock. They haven't been updated. And this is a way to kind of force the issue and get folks investing in their buildings in a way that will, generally speaking, with a quick turnaround, have a return on that investment. Any other questions? Okay, so we're sold on the concept. You all are going to work with the Building Energy Exchange, and everyone here is going to stick around for that free beer, the networking, and then the USGBC program, right? And there's free food.
Help yourself to food, get some drinks. We'll be networking for the next half an hour or so, and then we'll get started on the split incentive topic around a little after 6, okay? Thank you all.